Welcome back to the program. As advertised, joining us on line number 10 is Nalcor Energy Vice President in charge of the Lower Churchill Project, Gilbert Bennett. Good morning, Gilbert. You're on the air.
Morning, Paddy. How are you today?
I'm doing fine. How about you, sir?
Not too bad at all.
Good. And, of course, you would be responding to many concerns that have been brought forward in the last, number of weeks, but really came to a head over this past weekend when some of the photographs from Muskrat Falls worksite were distributed on social media predominantly. And this is about the discarded and now tangled steel girders that were once supposed to be part of the dome so that we could do more work in the wintertime. Couple of questions. Well, let's begin with this. Who made the decision in the first place to build the dome?
So the dome, the integrated cover system, or ICS as we call it, was included in the Staldy's proposal for the project. And it was an approach that they had planned to use to develop the project, the powerhouse and spillway during winter conditions. So, we look at that as the same way as any other piece of temporary infrastructure. They have maintenance garages, they have admin buildings, they have workshops and trucks and heavy equipment and cranes and a whole mountain of other material that they need to build the project. But what we've contracted is to have a powerhouse and spillway built. Right? How they get there was their proposed approach to build those facilities.
And so the decision to build and then the decision that all of a sudden half built was good enough and then consequently to tear down was what was not going to be completed. That is all firmly within the authority and the responsibility of Staldy at their cost inside their already fixed cost contract. Is that...
So they look at that and said, those are the types of decisions that I characterize as project management. You look at a condition and you make a decision to go a different way, change your plan, and move forward from there. I mean, those issues happen, from day to day. This one is Staldy's decision. They looked at it and said, is the risk inherent in this worth the effort? Is it worth the time and effort? And they elected to. They made this decision back in the latter part of last year, early this year. They said ultimately we're not going to use the full cover system.
And when it was itemized as part of the proposal in the original contract, how has the cost been affected based on what they thought it was going to cost, how the project proceeded with the ICS, and then its eventual teardown of a portion of it? What was the dollars and cents at the beginning, and what did it actually cost at the end of the day?
So I go back to what we contracted for. It was powerhouse and spillway.
Right, so there was they didn't itemize anything. They just said, here's the big number, and this will include just the delivery of the final product.
This is what I want, right? I want a powerhouse and spillway, and I want the civil work associated with that.
The issue of time is going to be an interesting one, too, because regardless of what it costs to engineer and construct the dome or portions of it, is what effect it had on the timeliness of the project. So people are suggesting that the delay caused by this incomplete ICS or dome has been extreme. Well, I've heard numbers from 6 to 18 months. What has been the effect on delay of the project strictly because of this component?
So we're looking for Staldy to deliver the powerhouse and spillway. And you've heard lots of what I would characterize as, commentators speculate on what they think they're going to do. Ultimately, the progress on the project, compliance with the schedule that we have, is one that Staldy has to work through.
But, there's already been project delays. First power has been delayed as per word coming from Nalcor. So what role does Staldy's contractual obligations, and in particular this ICS, have to do with the delays that have already been suffered?
So, again, they have to manage the project. They have to look at the milestones they have in their contract, and they have to take their affairs from there. And they have to develop a recovery plan to move things forward. And
what are the penalties or the apparatus we have in place to ensure or to penalize when and if delays are incurred because of their decision making?
So we have terms and conditions in the contract that address schedule and performance, and I'm not going to get into those in detail, other than to say that there are penalties there. And they have to work to that schedule.
When they make a decision, and I understand you say that they've been contracted to deliver X, Y, and Z, but when they make decisions like this, what authority or role does Nalcor, and in particular, what role do you play? Because ultimately, you'll have to be the one answering to the legislature, you'll have to be the representative from Nalcor Energy answering to me and to us through the venues like this. So what role do you play in the decision making?
So we don't make the decisions. right? We're here to manage the project, and we're here to manage our contractors. So just think about that for a second. You start directing the contractor, you start assuming a whole mountain of responsibility for that. So there's a big difference between the management of our contractor and the ultimate management of the work on site, which is our contractor's responsibility. The techniques, the approaches, the manpower, the personnel, the resources, the subcontractors they bring to bear, ultimately are decisions they have to make.
There's also, and some of these issues that I'm going to speak to now, I'm not necessarily sure what exactly some of these are in reference to, so you'll have to bear with me. There's also been conversation about delays incurred in the diversion of the river, and some of that to do with this particular piece of construction, the ICS. What is the schedule? What has been the effect on this diversion plan, which has not yet taken place?
So the ICS has nothing to do with the diversion.
Okay.
Right. The ICS is for the powerhouse. The diversion is tied to the construction of the spillway. We've already said in previous reports that we intended to delay diversion a year. We had slack in our schedule, and we've moved that out a year. Ultimately, that decision in of itself doesn't affect the delivery date for power. You look at the construction sequence, the amount of time we've made available for construction of the main dam, you time diversion accordingly. That's been discussed previously, looked at by the independent engineer, and we don't see an issue there. Although I have noticed that people have jumped up and down on that on social media over the past little while, but that's not really new information. In terms of the project schedule, the river certainly has to be diverted in order to construct the main dam. But the timing of that is something we would manage within the overall project schedule.
And so what has been the reasons for the delay in said diversion?
So when you look at there are a couple of reasons. One is that we have not awarded the contract yet for the dam. And Ed Martin and myself have both been clear that we're going to sign those contracts when we're ready to sign those contracts, when we have the best commercial value, when the procurement process is complete. And we have not completed that process, but we're still managing the overall project schedule, looking at the diversion time and saying, okay, let's lock those together. And then the other piece is the progress on the spillway, which needs to be ready to accept the diverted water from the river.
So what becomes of this steel? People are saying there's an appropriate place for it to find a home, whether it be in our control or for some of the projects ongoing. So who controls where it goes and why and where the money goes as a result of the sale, even though it's for scrap, which is unfortunate?
So it's been breathtaking for me. I mean, this is, as I said, this temporary work that Staldi is undertaking. They're going to look at that the same way any other material that they purchased in order to build a project.
Okay.
What they're delivering to us is powerhouse and spillway. So, what they do with the material they're using to build a project ultimately is their accountability.
Well, of course, and whether or not you or Mr. Martin or anyone else thinks these are reasonable questions to ask, the unfortunate reality for you and us is that Nalcor is our go-to. Astaldi won't talk to me, so that's why we're asking you. There's a comment here from a Twitter follower, and he says, last year Mr. Bennett was telling us that we are $340 million more expensive, partially due to productivity investments, i.e. the dome. True or false?
I don't know about i.e. the dome. I mean, as I said, when we look at the overall evolution of the project estimate, we discussed what the drivers were at the time. Also recognize that for the construction of the powerhouse and spillway, we went through a global request for proposal process. We had multiple contractors who participated in that process. They had a variety of techniques that they were using to build a project, and this is the outcome of that process.
I think people are still confused, and this will be the last time I go down this road, is the cost issue. Our overall contract with Astaldi is, how would you characterize it, as fixed cost, regardless of their good decisions, bad decisions, project management, day-to-day decisions, where this steel goes, what have you. Astaldi is a fixed cost regardless, and penalties in place for terms and conditions for meeting all the milestones. Is that how it goes? Plain and simple.
The math is straightforward, and you've heard this referred to in two different ways, but the math gets you to the same place. There are unit prices for material in the contract.
Right.
Those unit prices multiplied by a quantity, and then there are some other individual line items that add up to a not-to-exceed number, and that's the price on the contract. Now, the reason that the math on the unit prices is fixed is because Staldy was presented with 100% of the engineering completed on the powerhouse and spillway in drawings and say, here's what you base your contract on.
Okay.
You've heard it referred both ways.
I have.
The math takes you to one place.
Okay, I can understand that. This is the last question, and I'm unfortunately late for the news. The conversation a couple of weeks ago was about a series of bonds. It was characterized as we are now paying for first power without first power flowing. And I think the number was, off the top of my head, $256 million worth of bonds that had come due. And I think it was a series of 6 bonds in place. Some of it old hydro investment and or liability, however people want to view it. Where does that last repayment of bonds stack up against the Muskrat Falls financing?
So that bond issue for hydro is unrelated to the project.
Okay.
Right. That's hydro's long-term debt. The debt matured. They refinanced, and as I understand, they've moved forward from there. That's a separate financing from Muskrat Falls.
Are any of those bonds in play when it comes to the Muskrat Falls contract? Is that part of that series of, I believe it was 6 is the number I was told?
The Muskrat Falls debt and the transmission lines are covered by long-term financing, which is separate from hydro's financing, which is covered by the federal loan guarantee. $5 billion of debt backed by the government of Canada.
How and when, if we exceed that $5 billion, which looks inevitable to many, how do we approach dealing with that? Is that money that's going to be looked to from the provincial government in direct transfer, or is the availability of more borrowing under a similar set of circumstances?
So the province, between the province and Nalcor, we'll have to look at that. The commitment is that will be funded by equity, that the debt from Canada is the amount of secured debt we're allowed to put on the project assets. Now, how the province and Nalcor fund that, we'll have to continue that conversation with the province.
This last question, I promise, and I'll let you go. Is it possible that one of the main contractors, people look at it through this, I think this lens, is SNC-Lavalin and Staldy are the 2 big ones for procurement and project management. Is it possible that one or both won't be here for the duration and the potential for another big company to have to come in and perform one of these major roles? Or are we in a place now where there's no turning back, and these because we've seen other companies dismissed for a variety of things. Are both of these other big player companies with massive contracts, are they going to be here throughout the duration and consequently be at our available to us for the terms and conditions, for penalties and whatnot if we miss our milestones?
We are working with the contractors that we currently have. There's no plan to remove anybody from site. But again, we're managing the contract, so I'm managing the project as a whole. So, based on all the information I have and everything I'm seeing and the progress we're taking, we're moving. We're moving with all of our contractors, and there's no reason at this point to say anything different than that.
We have had the benefits agreement updates and the job numbers and what have you. When's the next actual financial update? The last one we had was at $6.99 billion, and we were told that represented, I believe, 90% of the contracts that were already given out, and that did not include the final costs associated with the stabilization of the North Spur. Has that contract been delivered?
That contract is with Gilbert Bennett.
And it's costed, though, and that's inside the 6.99.
We have an estimate in the cost estimate, yep.
And how does that one work so far as fixed cost and the company's responsibility to deliver not only on cost but on schedule?
So you'd be careful with providing a fixed cost contract to a contractor who's doing geotechnical work, and we're providing a lot of guidance based on what we're seeing in the field. So we'll look at the units and the quantities that are there. We've applied contingency on those, and we're managing that directly in the field.
When's the next fiscal update so far as any other overruns that have been incurred since the last one that brought us to 6.99?
If we have a significant change, we'll be reporting that. So I don't have a fixed date on that. If there's a significant change, we'll report from there.
I appreciate your time this morning, Gilbert.
No problem, Patty.
Okay, bye-bye.
Have a chance.
Bye-bye. Gilbert Bennett is the Vice President of Nalcor Energy, responsible for the Lower Churchill project.